If you want to climb in TFT, you have to improve on many different aspects of the game. I have made 50 tips and tricks that can improve your gameplay in set 8 and in your games in future sets. But I have to mention that this does include a lot of specific mechanics for set 8. This video is highly recommended for you who are new to set 8 or are a returning player. If you're not ranked master or higher yet, there will be a lot of things that you can use. And even if you're in the top 1%, there will be something for you. Arguments have been here for a while, but in set 8 we have hero arguments, which you can get once every game. You get 3 different arguments to choose from, just like normal, but these arguments make one of your units a hero. And when your hero is in play, the argument will be active. These arguments can be many different things and used in many different ways. They can be chosen as team arguments, giving your team a buff. An example would be if you look at Malphite at the far right. Gain a Malphite. When you field him, your team restores 20% of the missing health when they cast abilities. And then we have hero arguments that only will benefit the hero. Like Zoe in the middle. Gain a Zoe. Her ability launches a second bubble at a different target, dealing 60% damage. There is 2 different hero arguments for each unit. A carry hero argument and a team support one. If you look at the heroes, you can see they have an aura around them. If the color is green, it's the support argument that have been chosen, and if the color is purple, it's the carry one. If you start learning the different arguments for each unit, you can quickly know what argument that have been picked up just by looking at the hero. If you're newer to the set or the game, the color can give you a direction on how you should play the hero. On average, 6% of all games should be without hero arguments, so you should probably expect to have hero arguments in most of your games. It's very hard to know what kind of arguments the game will give you, but there is a few things that you can try to remember. If you get a gold argument as your first and a silver as your second, there will be a 100% chance of not getting a hero argument in this game. This will always be a gold argument as your last one. That is the only combination that guarantees you not to get a hero argument after you've seen the 2 first arguments. Some of the more crazy combinations that you can try to remember is the ones that we all love or hate, plasmatic arguments. If you get one of these as your first argument, you will not see any silver arguments in this game. That means your second one will be a gold, a hero, or another plasmatic argument as your second one. Is it a gold one? Then you will get a hero as your third. This is the most chill outcome you can get when you keep in mind that you started with a plasmatic argument. Is the second one a hero argument? Then you will get another plasmatic as your last one. Is your second argument a plasmatic argument as well? Then there is a chance that all of them will be the same, but there's also a chance that the last one will be a hero argument. You can scout the other players by clicking the name or using the hotkeys 1 and 3, and you can use space for getting back to your own board. You can also use your hotkeys to buy experience and refreshing your shop by using the keys F and D. And now back to the arguments. 3 times during your game you have to pick between 3 arguments, but only once you can choose to reroll your options. So you might want to consider saving your reroll for the argument that have the biggest impact on your game, and that could very well be the hero argument as a rule of thumb. Just like normal, the arguments that are given to choose from are more likely to be useful to your current team. That means if you have a lot of enemy squad units, you're more likely to get an argument that gives you an emblem for that trait. And the same goes for hero arguments. If you have an active trait, you're more likely to get a hero unit from that trait. That means do you have the trait Bruiser active, you have a bigger chance to get a hero argument that makes a Bruiser unit the hero. And it can be any of the 7 Bruisers, even you do only have 4 of them on your board. As it is right now, the first argument is a bit more random, but hero arguments that are given as the second and the third is heavily manipulated by your active traits. If you have saved your reroll for the hero argument, you want to notice what the gold cost of the heroes you can get. If you have an option between a hero that costs 3 gold and the 2 others options are 2 cost units, the reroll will again give you a new argument for a 3 cost unit, and the 2 other arguments will be for 2 cost units. Everyone else will also get a 3 cost hero and 2 2 cost heroes arguments just like you. Before you start the game, it's a good idea to know what direction you want to play. But depending on what items, units and arguments you get, you might have to change your playstyle into something else. That also means when you start the game, you want to pick a component at the starting carousel that you can use in more than one comp that you know. This gives you the option to be more flexible. You almost always want to take the component you need and not the unit on the first carousel. We do that since we can't choose what items we get in the game, but we can choose what units we want with enough gold. And very overpowered way to make sure that you're getting the component you want before everyone else is to go to options, go to hotkeys, and then change the player move click so you can move your little legend by mouse click and also with a key. That means you can spam twice as fast as everyone else and guarantee yourself a great start of the game. If you're getting a lot of components that you don't really want to slam into an item yet, you can benefit its stats by giving the components to your units to make them stronger, but you have to be aware of how you want to use the unit later in the game. We can only put the component on a unit if we already know that it will be sold later, or we know that we can make a useful item on that unit. Be aware that if you have a unit with a component and an extra unit on your bench, then you only need one unit to upgrade it. If you are in this situation, make sure you don't pick up a unit on the carousel, because these 3 units will be combined, giving you an item that you might not want it to have. Some items you do want to have if you want your abilities to crit is a dual gauntlet or infinity edge. In set 7, it was a great option to stack these items, since dual gauntlet made ability able to crit and infinity edge gave us a lot of crit chance. But the items have been reworked and they are now too similar to stack. One huge thing to mention is that they both give us the ability to crit with spells. That means it's not a great idea to use both of these items on the same unit. But do you want 100% crit chance? There is more than one way that you can do it. But if you're only using items, you can go for Infinity Edge, Last Whisper and Quicksilver, and then you will have your 100% crit chance. Another item that got a makeover is Protector's Vow. This item used to be a utility tank item that was giving the holder and nearby allied units a shield and tank stats. Now the item only benefits the holder. Speaking of items that help other units, was Banshee's Claw. These items have been removed and now a belt and a glove give us the new item Guardbreaker. This item gives us AD and AP, and after an item holder attacks a shielded enemy, they now do 30% more damage for 3 seconds. That's an item that are great against tank units who get shielded from their abilities, like Annie, Vi, Galio, Poppy, Riven, Isen, and many more units, and can even counter arguments. Shield is one way to keep your units alive. Another one is healing. Sometimes you need your carry to stay alive by itself. If your opponent can target your carry without going through your frontline, you might want to consider putting a healing item on your carry. Pick Bloodthirster if you want maximum healing on your carry. This item only benefits the holder by healing a lot, but also giving it a shield when the unit is going low. Another option is Gunblade. Pick Gunblade if you want your carry to heal itself, but also healing the lowest percent allied for the same amount. And the last option is Hand of Justice. This item have the lowest healing, but also provide damage. If your frontline need healing by itself, you can pick Redemption, who heals allied within 1 hex for % of their maximum health. This item also reduces AoE damage. Another thing is that this item is best on high health units. That means 3-star units or high cost units that are 2-star is optimal. And it's even better if the units also have a defensive ability. But do you find yourself fighting big health units or carries that seems impossible to kill, doing to all the healing or health? Get yourself a Sunfire Cape for your frontline or Morello for your AP carry to reduce their healing. Morello is a great item to stop healing, but it's only good if you put it on the right unit. You want to look for AP units that hit many different units to start the burning on as many enemies as possible. Vel'Koz is a unit that only hit one target, which means Morello is not a great option for him. But units like Nunu and Fiddle, who hits a lot of units, would make more sense. Another simple but really useful tip is to read the abilities of the units. We often think that we know what the units do just by looking at their movements. Let's take Aurelion Soul. Aurelion Soul's spell is that he does AP damage to a couple of random units, and if you only look at that, Morello wouldn't be the worst item. But by reading his spell, we know that he already gives anti-heal, which means Morello would probably be one of the worst items to put on him. Other than AP items and AP carries, it's often a good idea to get main items, like Blue Buff and Spear of Sojin. But what items is best on what units? As a rule of thumb, you can put Blue Buff on AP units who have a low mana pool, like Soraka, and Sojin on AP units that have a big mana pool, like MF or Aurelion Soul. Aurelion Soul is a threat unit, and threat units is different from all other units, since none of them have any traits. To make these units viable in the game, they have extra stats compared to other units with the same gold cost. That means we can almost always fit a threat unit into our current comp. These units are most likely to be found later in the game, since they at least cost 3 gold. Going from the late game to the early game, here you want to find direction on what comp you want to build by the units and items you get. But do you find yourself able to make 10 gold before everyone else from the loot that you get in the first rounds? You might want to consider going for that. It could give you a huge advantage for the rest of the game. 10 gold means more income every round. And more gold every round means you hit 20, 30, 40 and 50 gold faster, and that will make your gold snowball. You can try to see if you can use gold and health as resources. Gold can be traded directly into units or experience, but in some situations you can indirectly trade your health for items or gold. Forcing some loss can sometimes make your gold snowball even faster by making a lose streak. This is something you probably only should do in the early game. It will also give you the advantage to pick an item on the carousel before everyone else, since you're probably on the lowest health. Other options specifically for this set is the trait Underground. If this trait is active, you will see the number 10 and another number, which is your points. After every play round, your points will start going a bit up, and when it hits 10, you can choose some loot or wait for the next time that you hit 10 again. And this time the loot will be even better. Every round you win, you will get a few points, and every time you lose, you will get a little bit more than when you're winning. This means you can try to lose on purpose to gain more points, which means you're trading your health for more loot. And just to give you some idea of what this trade can give you, the first time you get some loot, it's probably gonna be a gold, but there will also be a chance of getting a component or something similar to getting a remover. If you do not choose this loot, the second time you will start seeing full items or even on items. The third time you will start seeing radiant items. And do you go even further, you have a chance to get a tactical crown, and number 5, 6 and 7 is just more of everything. Another trait that provides items is Gadgeteen. These units will make a random modified item every round. Those items are known items but stronger, but the items will self-destruct, and the round after you will get a new one. That means you have to remember to use the items every time you get a new one. One of the items that you can get is a modified Giant Slayer. The Giant Slayer is a great item for taking down units with a lot of health. This item can be used by any carry, since it provides more damage no matter if it's AD or AP. There isn't really any super strong AP carry items that use bows, so do you find yourself getting a lot of bows meanwhile you're playing an AP comp, you might want to consider making a Giant Slayer yourself. After every round, we have some seconds to make decisions. Are you new to the game? You want to prioritize to learn the units and the comp that you're playing, or are you one step further? You have to start scouting other players. You can see which players you have a chance to fight next, and by default you can try to put your unit to the stand in the best way for most of the players that you can fight. Some units have abilities that makes a huge impact on the game. Echo's ability is to get a shield, dash behind the target, and taunting units around him. This means you can put him in a place where you force the enemy's units to face in a wrong direction. A great example would be that he is taunting a Sejuani who have a huge AoE stun, and putting Echo the right way will make you avoid your full team getting stunned. Did you play the last set? You already know about bruisers, but they have changed a bit. This time their health scales by percent, and that means it also buff items like Warmog. In set 8 we do not have any assassin traits, but do you activate Hacker, you will spawn a Hackerim who will connect to the closest unit, to his right or below him. In the start of the round, he will transport the unit to the backline, and that means you can send a unit right in the face of the other players, or just to their backline. You will often do this to one of your carries. And do you need to swap the unit fast? Move Hackerim. As long as you move him to a place where there is a spot for the connected unit, the unit would also be moved. Try not to make Hackerim have to choose between two units. It might make him leave the first one behind. In the early game, it's great to get yourself a win or lose streak. And are you in the position to get a streak? Try to set up your team against the strongest player if you're on a win streak. And the same way, make sure that you will lose to the weakest player if you are on a lose streak. But in the best case, you will of course lose and keep your lose streak, meanwhile minimizing the health loss. One way to make sure that you have a bigger chance of win streaking is to play units that synergize well. That means in the early game, having many traits active make your units stronger. Another thing is to make a front and a backline. If you have no backline units to deal damage and no items that provide damage, you will be super tanky, but you can't really kill any enemies. And the same thing goes only for backline units. Can kill some units fast, but you will likely lose due to only have squeezy units. And else you should just abuse the units that you randomly get to 2-star. One thing you have to be aware of when you're making 2-star units, when you're using 1-cost units and you want to sell it, you will get all 3 gold back. That means you can always make 2-star units from 1 cost if you don't need the gold at the moment. But do you make 2, 3, 4 or 5 cost units into 2-star, you will not get the full amount of gold back. That means it's not always a good idea to make a 2-star unit if you don't need it. Another thing that is a bad idea to make if you don't need it later is items. Make sure not to slam items if you don't need the items for your comp. But on the other hand, it's a great idea to slam items in the early game that you can use in the later game. Building items like Sunfire Cape in the early game can give you a small value in every single fight, saving some HP. This little health might end up saving you and getting you into top 4 instead of top 5. Getting top 4 or top 5 is a huge difference for your climbing, and small things can make the difference. Putting your units the same spot every single round makes it way too easy for the other players to put their units in the perfect spot before fighting you. Try move your units just a bit every round, making sure that you don't get a Hackerim on top of your carry or getting CC'd in the start of the game. Zephyr and Shroud are really strong items in the late game. And do you have full items on your carry and your tank, look for these items. These items is not your first prioritize, and that means you have to get damage items and tank items first, but after that they are great to pick up. Zephyr is a great item to take out the solo carry or if the enemies have one huge tank, and Shroud is a great item if the enemy's comp play in a stacked position. These items can be the reason why that you lost just a little bit less health to a loss, or you won a round, making your place one step higher in the end of the game. If possible, try always to put these items on units that doesn't really matter where they start, so you freely can move them around and hit the right targets. If you find a comp that you really like, the worst thing is that you start getting contested. This means that you have to get the units that you need before everyone else. And do you find yourself in a game playing with 2 others who wants to play the same comp as you will have to make a choice. One thing you can do is to force the comp by rolling for it, or else you can start leveling and give up on the comp. If you are willing to fight for the comp, you have to constantly check on how many units the other players have, to make sure that you are able to get the units in your shop that you need. Everyone have a shared pool of units. In this pool there is 29 of every 1-cost units, 22 of all the 2 costs, 18 of the 3 cost, 12 of the 4 cost, and 10 of the 5 cost. This information can help you when you're scouting the other players to see how many they are holding of a unit that you need before you start rolling. If you want a chance to find a 3-cost unit faster in the very early game, you can pre-level by buying experience once. You can do that at round 1-4. This will give you 4 out of 6 experience, and since you will get 2 experience after every round, you will level up. This means you are getting level 4 and having a chance of getting a 3-cost unit at the first round of stage 2. This can be useful if you're looking for a strong 3-cost unit in the early game. Then you might find the carry that you need for the rest of the game, or if you like to play comps like Underground, being level 4 makes you able to find 4 out of the 3 units that you need as fast as possible. This choice of buying experience to get level 4 is bigger than you think. To newer players, I will recommend to get 10 gold as fast as you can if it's an option, and by that, don't buy the level. But are you in a situation where you get 2 2-star units, you should probably level up, since you have a good chance of winning a lot of rounds. Do you often find yourself losing a lot of health every game? You might want to play around with leveling up early. But do you always level up? You might want to start trying to go for 10 gold fast, and instead of always do the same, try to be a little more flexible and play around what the game gives you. Are you a platinum player or below, and are you more or less playing the same comp every game, and at the same time you're kinda stuck when you're climbing? Try to play a bit more into what the game gives you. See if you can go for early game tank items like Sunfire K plus another tank item and put it on your first 2-star tank unit. Let's say that will be Renekton, no matter if he's strong or not at the moment. When you see your chance to give the tank items over to another unit that are higher in costs, let's say a 2-star Vi or a 2-star Ramos or even a 2-star Zac, then put the items over to that stronger unit. And in the same way, do it with your AD or attack speed carries. You should prioritize your tank items first. Play a little aggressive on your leveling, and if you suddenly get 2 of the same units, try to roll for the last one if it fits into your comp. This might save you a lot of health in the early game, making a lot of players die even before you find out what you're going to play. This will also force you to see new combinations. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to learn specific comps. It's a great idea to learn 1 or 2 comps and really try to master them. What items should you build first? What items is the best? Should you greed for the best items? Is it okay to make this item if you get the chance? Is a 2-star enough to get you into top 4? Have other comps been nerfed? And if your comp didn't get nerfed, they might have indirectly buffed it. And if you're playing into a comp you know really well, you will have a great baseline, and from here you can build into something else if the game forces you to it. In set 8, Syndra is a 5-cost unit, and her ability is to pick up units on your bench and throw them into the board. Does she have a mana Zane? You will see her throwing in tons of units. But it's nice to know there is some units like Fiddlestick who have a passive that make him stronger the more units that die. And there's also an admin trait that gives you something similar, but you cannot abuse this with Syndra. And the same goes for CC Rod and every other mechanics. It does only benefit from units that you put on your board yourself, not even the Prankster trait. Both Syndra and Fiddlestick are 5-cost units, and they will only show up in your shop in the late game, from level 7 and above. When you start the game, you have a 100% chance of getting 1-cost units, but every time you're leveling up, the 100% will split into smaller pools. At level 1 and 2, you can only get the 1-cost units. At level 3, you will start see 2-cost units in your shop. At level 4, you are still most likely to see 1 and 2 costs, but have a 15% chance of seeing 3-cost units. At level 5, you have a great chance of getting 1, 2 and 3 costs, and a very little chance of 4 costs. If you're playing a comp where you need 3-star 1-cost units, level 5 is where you want to start your slow rolling. At level 6, you have the biggest chance of getting 2 cost, and here is of course where you want to slow roll if you want 2-cost units. Level 7 is for 3-cost units, but it's also the level where 4-cost units really start to show up. Then there's level 8. Here there's a lot of comps that don't go further. Now you're seeing tons of 4-cost units. You shouldn't really try to hit 1-cost units here, but it's a great place to get your 4-cost units into a 2-star. Are you getting to level 9, 5-cost will really start showing up all the time, due to the higher percent, and so everyone else is holding a lot of the units from 1 to 4-cost. Higher level than 9 is only possible with arguments, and here the percent moves even further to the right. 2 of the most talked about arguments in set 7 were Double Trouble and Build Different. Make sure that you know that even threat units don't have any traits. They cannot benefit from any of these arguments. The argument Build Different is great if you can build an attack speed carry. but you cannot use the 5-cost unit Aphelios, since you have a solo trait called Arsenal. Aphelios have this cool mechanic that you have to choose between 3 different weapons. Every time he gets full mana, he will use the weapon that you have been chosen. The one on the left is the AoE damage, the middle one is for stunning, and the one on the right is for solo target. If you don't know what you should pick, you should often go for the AoE, but if you want to play around with it a bit more, here are some tips. Comps that don't have one strong unit and have carries in the backline, you should always choose AoE. But do your 5-cost units don't have any items, you can play him as a utility unit and go for the stun. But do you have items for him, you can choose to play him for solo target. That could be a good idea if your enemy have a big strong bruiser units like a 3-star mech Jax. If he wants to change the weapon that he uses, you can just put him out and in again on the board and pick a new one. This is great when you have to play a specific player in the late game. Did you like these tips? Make sure to subscribe and like the video for more tips and guides on set 8. This really took a long time to make, so thanks for watching.